One of the things that I wanted to highlight for everyone is we did pilot our private LinkedIn peer forums last Friday. Those forums will go live on Thursday. So your folks in HR will have a private group, your food safety folks will have a private group, your supply chain folks will have a private group, as well as our CEOs. And then those scaling companies are our tinies, as we like to call them, those companies that are, just have a few years under their belt. So again, those forums will be available to all of our members on Thursday. And in addition to that, we also will have a resource forum, which is open to all of our members. And that will be a great place for our technical and professional service providers to post their resources and to respond to questions that the industry is asking. So, and one final thing, we are actually going to be also developing a COVID page on the FaB website, and the page will start to aggregate the resources that are available to you with a real focus on the food and beverage industry. So we'll share general resources, but more importantly, we want to help you navigate the resources specifically for the food and beverage industry. So watch for that later this week as well. So with that said, let me take you through how we are planning this to work for us today. We are going to do a quick round robin with our executive board. I will prompt each of you in alpha order based on your company. So listen for when I call your first name. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, share a challenge that you're facing, and be brief. We've got 30 minutes dedicated to this, but we thought this would be a great way for Secretary Hughes to hear from a nice swath of the industry, providing a variety of perspectives on the industry. And obviously, the Secretary comes to this being the former Chief Mission Officer of Organic Valley. So we'll have a real ear towards what all of you are saying. There is an option for you at the bottom of your screen to offer some Q&A. We are not taking live questions. You can post them to the site or to the forum based on the linkage on the bottom of your screen. Gina Bulke, our Director of Talent, will be monitoring those questions, and given time that we have for them, she will share some of those directly with the Secretary at that portion of the meeting. And any questions that we don't get to, we will look at thoroughly and find answers to them for you and get them, again, posted back out to you so that you've got the answers to the questions that are driving your specific businesses and making sure that we can keep you in business. For the board members, we will unmute you behind the scenes here, but you're also going to need to unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. After we hear from the board, the Secretary can digest that information and respond to that. Again, I think you'll be in a perfect place to do that, Secretary, based on your experience. And then again, we'll open it up to Q&A. And for any of you, we will share all the Q&A questions that are answered, and there will be a video created of this call so that it will be accessible to you after the meeting. We'll probably have that posted later today for you. So without further ado, I'd like to have Evan Hughes, the co-founder of Central Standard Distillery, introduce yourself, a little bit about your company, and share some of the challenges that you're facing, Evan. Be sure to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Secretary Hughes, for taking the time to be with us today. As Shelley mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Central Standard Craft Distillery in Milwaukee. We are, some of the challenges we're facing, I think, is you'll hear a lot on this call. A lot of revenue streams are drying up for us. The right decision to close restaurants and bars has really slowed our sales, ground them to a halt. So we're doing everything that we can to ensure that our employees and team members have the confidence that they need, that they'll be retained here during this period of time. We've switched our production facility from making alcohol to making disinfectant spray that we're making available for free to those most in need. We're working with a lot of nonprofit homeless shelters, food banks, assisted living facilities, a lot of places like that just don't have access to disinfectant spray in this tough time. So we're going to remain committed to keeping up with that as long as we can. And I'll pause there.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Next up is David Carpenter with Christian Hansen. David, if you could unmute yourself there in the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah, hello, this is David Carpenter, and I'm an executive advisor at Christian Hansen here in Milwaukee. And, you know, being a global company, Christian Hansen has lots of challenges right now, being able to move raw materials across the country as well as across the world to be able to provide the essential ingredients needed to the food and agricultural industry. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing, and have even considered chartering our own planes to move products around since the airline industry is shutting down. The concern is, of course, being able to provide those essential ingredients to keep the food chain going. And you know, at this point, we're doing okay, but I think that's going to be a challenge going forward. Is how do we swallow this snake of a problem and then unwind it once things appear to be better.
Great, thank you very much, David. Next up is Stacy Peterson with Knoyles. Stacy, if you would unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner.
Good morning. Thank you, Missy Hughes, for being with us. Knoyles is a bulk ingredient supplier to the wholesale industry. And I asked around, several of our people are actually going through the Export Tech program right now. So that's a great program that you guys offer. I just want to thank you for that. I'd have to say we're not really experiencing many challenges. It's kind of the opposite. We're actually being inundated with calls for ingredients that we can supply into the industry, such as aloe vera to be made into hand sanitizers. People want us to make the hand sanitizers, which we can shut down a couple of our rooms and do that as well. I'd say the biggest challenge is that internationally customers can't take products at this time, but we don't seem to be having problems sourcing or anything to do with logistics in terms of getting freight from one place to the other.
Great, thank you, Stacy. Next up is Patty Haybik, the president of Feeding America. Missy, for your benefit, our board does a nice job of representing the breadth of the industry, and it was important for us to have an organization like Feeding America be a part of it. So Patty, if you would unmute yourself, you're ready to go.
Thanks, Shelley, and thank you, Secretary. We, as you can imagine, we were designed to handle emergencies, and this is a calamity. And so our demand on our services and on our food product to the food shelter, food pantries, meal programs, and emergency shelters has exponentially increased. We're really just focusing on the fact that there's a short-term crisis, a midterm crisis, and a long-term crisis, and we need to be available in all parts of those sectors. So we are in great need of continued donations of food. So we've asked people to get pretty creative in terms of if restaurants have shut down and they have food available to move into the system, we will accept it and move it. If there's any creative way to access the supply chain, we have been getting some additional dollars and making a lot of purchases of truckloads of food to move into the hunger relief sector. This is a really critical time. We have a lot of calls coming in. Demand has exponentially gone up. So food donations are incredibly valued right now. Financial donations, so we can purchase food right now, is a model that we typically haven't had to follow, but we are doing in a very big way right now. Support system into the nonprofit sector. A lot of our pantries are closing because they're run by volunteers. And so we're still seeing a decent supply of volunteers, but we're looking to get things like Team Rubicon, that we've put a request out for the National Guard to come in to help support our key positions like receiving, shipping, distribution, and that kind of thing, so we can keep the sector moving. Big shout out to Central Standard for helping provide us with disinfectant, but we are in need of more hand sanitizer, disinfectant, protection for our staff so that they stay healthy and are on the front lines in both of our 2 food bank facilities, as well as the pantry support. We've been moving hand sanitizer into the pantry system. So yes, we're moving pretty quick right now and could use any kind of creative support and food funds and volunteers.
Great, thank you, Patty. Yes, to all of you that can give, please consider those most in need right now, for sure. I think next up is Jeff Genteen of Masters Gallery. Jeff, you're on a call, I believe.
Right. Am I?
You're on.
Hi, am I on? Okay. Hi, thank you for hosting this. Jeff Genteen, CEO of Masters Gallery Foods. We're a cheese packaging company, and you know, basically, as an essential business, with so much of it being devoted to the retail sector, we are absolutely inundated with orders, record levels the last 2 weeks. Orders received, pounds shipped in the retail segment. I mean, it makes, you know, the Thanksgiving, Christmas period look like nothing. That's been a challenge, but we're happy to have the business. The flip side of that, of course, is our food service business, which has absolutely gone in the toilet. We have 4 lines that do large format shreds, and there's virtually no production scheduled for the next 2 weeks, which is absolutely crazy to think of. We're working with those customers as best we can. They're trying to cancel orders, and they're cognizant of inventory already produced, but we know we're going to be sitting on a lot for a period of time. So that's a bit of a concern, but right now we're focused on just being a good partner with those people, and it's a cross section of people, distributors as well as restaurant chains, regionally, nationally. We don't know how these people will come back. Some probably won't. The larger chains probably will be okay. We are being asked for extended terms, things like that, for 2 to 6 months, depending on how long this goes. So we're probably hitting the tip of the iceberg there. But in general, our people are showing up to work. They seem to be in a good mood. They're happy to have a job. They see their friends and neighbors go through issues, and they're happy to be working. But at the same time, you know, just because we're exempted in a critical industry, there's still some social distancing concerns within the plant. And how do we communicate that? We're not in violation of anything, but obviously in a manufacturing environment, we've got folks that are working very closely together, in some cases almost, you know, a couple of feet apart from each other for extended periods of time. So that's something that we're having to communicate to the people. But right now, I got to say the workforce is very calm, happy to be here, and we're actually very pleased with the response.
Great, thank you so much, Jeff. Next up, I know that Katie Wessel isn't on the call, but I believe husband Matt, partner in the business. Matt, could you unmute and give us a quick update?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Older.
No worries.
So yeah, Katie's doing the childcare thing with our kids today. So she asked me to call in, and I think our story is most similar to Evan's. So Milwaukee Pretzel Company, we primarily have built our business around food service. And so the minute those started shutting down a week or so ago, we started to see our purchase orders not come in or get called back. So right now, we immediately pivoted to online sales. So we're lucky enough to have a retail brand that, while not a huge part of our normal sales efforts, it's there, and it's something that we're able to do to bring in some revenue, keep some of our staff busy. We had to lay off 14 of our 24 production members last Friday. The other 10 we're hoping to keep on through this as long as the online orders come in. So we are offering free shipping and free local delivery to just bring in some revenue and hopefully break even throughout it. Like everybody else, just hopeful that when this eventually ends, that stuff will more or less go back to normal. We do make bread, and so we have reached out to a number of non-traditional would-be partners for us. So the grocery stores, places like that are more inundated with demand right now, we're offering our services to simply provide buns and bread products like that. Nothing's really materialized yet. We've had a lot of conversations. I think a lot of the grocers are just busy and trying to keep their heads above water because they're having the opposite problem we are. But we're there, and even listening to Feeding America, I know we have a lot of product in our freezer that we're probably going to have to eventually donate because it'll be past its freezer shelf life. So if there's an opportunity to give away some of that frozen bread, we can. And I mean, we have a facility that can make bread and a smaller staff that's willing to do it on a daily basis. But I think the opportunity there for us right now is just the online. So our concern is just that this doesn't linger too long. And I think if there's one thing keeping us up at night, it's what will happen to our buyers, the end consumers, the longer this drags on. So you think of the bars, restaurants, food service customers that aren't super financially stable, and a really long shutdown could potentially put them out of business for good. That obviously starts to affect our sales as well. But no interruptions yet in the supply chain. We're able to get all the flour, salt, yeast that we need. Our trucking companies are still picking up and delivering as needed. So it's really just been the orders.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. Next up is Brian Durst with Tribe 9. Brian, if you'd unmute yourself.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, terrific. So I'm Brian Durst, CEO of Tribe 9 Foods. We manufacture our own food brands, fresh pasta under the Taste Republic and RP's pasta brands. Yum Butter is organic and natural nut butters. But then we also manufacture food for other brands, as well as private label products for grocers and ingredients for others to use. We are a WDC grant recipient, so we're very appreciative of WDC's support. And we're located in Madison, Wisconsin. So we were already in the midst of attempting to purchase 5 new lines to support our budgeted 50% growth this year, before anything, kind of more recently developed. And that was on top of the, $15 million we spent or are currently deploying from our refinance last November, expanding our plant and both the real estate and 3 new lines. So we're executing kind of a lot of growth and attempting to support even more before anything developed. So as grocery stores shelves are empty, we're trying to meet near-term increases in demand on top of the high growth we were already attempting to execute. We do have some foods. While I anticipate food service being a big business for us in the long term, at the moment, I guess somewhat thankfully it's a small piece of our business. So we are seeing declines in food service, but it's a small piece of our overall business. We're seeing orders increase week over week in the order of magnitude of 40 to 100%. Again, that was on top of the growth we were already experiencing. And so for me, I'm really focused on employee safety. We're 87 employees, making sure that we have 87 employees healthy and their families healthy and available to come to work. We're doing things like providing more sick time for employees. We've done that ahead of kind of federal requirements, and allowing people to leave with sick time for really just about any reason. We're also doing things like buying gift cards from Madison area restaurants and providing those to our employees to both help the restaurants, but also support our employees and their families. I've been focused on pre-purchasing raw materials. I've also been committing to new CapEx without really certainty on the financing sources that are going to be available to execute on that. I'd say liquidity is really tight. I exhausted all of our availability on our line of credit to bring in raw materials to have line of sight on 3 months of supply. I'm trying to take that 3 months up to 6 months. And I'm really concerned we'll see higher freight rates, higher labor costs, and lower productivity if we see a run of kind of COVID-19 either through on the one hand in freight channels, overall activity is down, increasing supply, but these drivers are crisscrossing states, and it wouldn't be unreasonable to start to see some sicknesses and lower freight availability. So I feel like I feel lucky to be in the position we're in with trying to scramble to meet dramatic growth and demand and kind of do our part to help families get the food that they need. But I really, don't really feel incredibly comfortable that we have a lot of room for error.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. Next up is Keith Smith with Bonco Products. Keith, if you could unmute yourself.
Keith Smith, president of Bonco Products. We are a flexible packaging company that services the food and beverage and also the healthcare space. Similar to some of the other stories you've heard, Secretary Hughes, is that we're very busy, certainly on the healthcare side and the food and beverage side as well. We're being tapped by FEMA to produce as much as we can from our specimen transport products. We make infection prevention products such as gloves and boot covers. And we heard also from some of our other board members that they're being asked to make hand sanitizer supplies. And so there's a big push to put those into what we have are called spouted pouches, and we have filling equipment for that. So it's extremely busy. So on the short term, what my concerns are is really staffing, and as demand has increased dramatically for these supplies, we used employees from the Robert Ellsworth Correctional Facility nearby. I'm in Kenosha County, and all those facilities are on lockdown. So I lost a significant part of my staff, labor staff, when that occurred. So we're in a bit of a scramble trying to find people and get them trained to support the increased demand. And similar, I think the themes are longer term is really what does the access to capital look like in the future to support the investment and growing business that we have. We've recently moved from Illinois, and WDC was a big part of that support and help of moving us from Illinois to Wisconsin. And we've been here for 2 years and been very happy with that transition and have expanded dramatically since then, and we want to continue to be able to do that. Certainly, the status of access to capital and the overall economy health weighs on you long term with the decisions that are being made on a routine basis. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Keith. Just putting a question out there, is Sam Malio on the line via phone? There's no way for us to know that. So, all right, the last board member that we've got a knowledge of that's on the call is Arthur Ersync, the co-founder of Wisconsin Foodie. Arthur, I'm wondering if you're hearing anything from the companies, in particular, some of the smaller farms that you've been working with.
Hello. So yeah, Arthur Ersync. I've reached out to a couple of cheesemakers and a couple of farmers, and I think for them it's all systems go. I know that from a cheese perspective, a lot of the cheesemakers I'm talking to are aging cheddars, aging cheeses, and it can be done pretty minimally. So they're with minimal staff. So I guess I'm talking a little bit of the smaller companies that are aging cheeses. But I guess they brought up some concerns about some of the fresher cheeses, fresher soft cheeses that that some of the cheesemakers may not be able to get rid of right now because of demand. So I think from a farming perspective, there's farmers out there. I think from I guess from a strangely positive thing to take away here is a lot of the farmers were suffering because of CSA programs. That were kind of that whole program was deteriorating here in Wisconsin a bit, where the model is you subscribe to a box of vegetables and the farmer will deliver a box once a month or once every other week. And I think with this kind of with this crisis, those farmers are now seeing an uptick in that business. So I think from the farming perspective, farmers are really going to be able to help, and they're going to be able to deliver fresh, healthy food to people once the season comes online. I run a farmers market here in the community I live, and we're having conversations today whether the farmers market can go on or not. We're all hopeful that by June this will all be over, but you never know, and it's hard for us right now to fundraise. It's hard for us to do the things we need to do to put the market together. So I think there's so much up in the air, and restaurants right now, luckily we have, and I want to say, a huge shout out to Secretary Hughes. What the WEDC is doing for our local small businesses, especially restaurants, is incredible. I've heard a lot of people just share their gratitude with me personally. So I want to thank you from everybody that I've talked to. It's appreciated, and it's a lifesaver for a lot of people. But there are a lot of restaurants and businesses closing around me. So I think people are scared. I haven't even been able to consider my business. I know Edible Milwaukee, I run a print, magazine, print magazine, local print magazine. And I couldn't in good faith talk to any small business right now about advertising dollars, so that puts one of our biggest issues of the year, which is summer, especially with the DNC coming on board. That puts our magazine in jeopardy. But to be honest with you, it's the last thing on my mind right now. The number one thing on my mind is, what can I personally do to help save our restaurants and small food businesses? And that's what I've been working every day on, making calls, talking to restaurants, talking to local leaders, and really trying to make sure that our industry stays alive, because right now it's on the brink. And I'm scared. I would say if 75% of the restaurants came back, we would be, and that would be a positive. That would be a great thing, because when you look at our state, you're looking at all these supper clubs, you're looking at all these little restaurants, all these little mom and pop restaurants that were already struggling to survive. And with this, is just the breaking point for a lot of people. So really scared about what the future looks like for Wisconsin restaurants. But I'm fighting the fight, and I will fight that fight until the bitter end. So just want to again say thank you so much to Secretary Hughes and what the WEDC is doing for our community. It's very much appreciated, and it's not going unnoticed. So thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Well, I think something that shined through all of those quick report outs was the positive nature of this industry and the passion behind the industry to make this all work for all of us. So thank you, board members, for chiming in for us. Kate Ramlow of the WEDC, Director of Sector Development, who works very closely with FaB Wisconsin, also serves on our board, but she will be deferring to the Secretary to make comments. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Secretary. I think we are all just terribly excited to hear from you. And I want to say from a gratitude note from FaB, WEDC has been an amazing partner for us, not only through our Accelerate program, and you heard from Milwaukee Pretzel just now. They were a benefit of going through that accelerator program. Obviously, Brian Durst talked about benefiting from your grants as well. In addition to that, last year you gave us a talent grant to really start to address the issues facing the industry on the talent front. So we couldn't be more proud to have WEDC as a partner, and more proud to have you on the line with us. So without further ado, Secretary Hughes.
Thank you, Shelley. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me this morning. And it was, I almost don't even want to have remarks and just have conversations with all of you. I took 3 pages of notes as the board members were going through the different challenges and issues that you all are facing. And so I'll touch on those. As Shelley mentioned, we scheduled this conversation 6 weeks ago or so, and I think we planned on having a very different conversation with you all as I've come into this role at WEDC and learning about all that's happening in Wisconsin. As you know, I was with Organic Valley for 16 years and have been involved in the food industry extensively, and always as I came into this role, I have thought about the strength of the food and beverage industry in Wisconsin, and certainly all of you show that. And I'm really excited to be on the phone with you. I've spent a lot of time in the last few days talking with businesses, and I'm talking with a lot of major heavy industry manufacturers and folks who are making trucks for the defense industry and forges, and it's nice to, I feel at home talking to all of you, so I'm glad to be able to be here with you today. So certainly, the last few weeks have unfolded in an incredibly different way than I anticipated coming into this role. And as I've seen the work that's been done in Wisconsin, the North Star always is public safety and health. And we've been focused on that at the administration level. The governor is, of course, focused on that. And I just want to tell you that the Department of Health Services has been working on this and watching this coming since it started in China. We have the benefit of being in Wisconsin. We're on the other side of the globe, and we're learning lessons as it comes around to us. And the steps that you have seen the governor take with the Safer at Home order that was issued today, yesterday, and in effect today, is indicative of learning the lessons that we're seeing and trying to prepare Wisconsin for avoiding the worst that we've seen in other places. So I think what I'd like to do is walk you through a little bit about the Safer at Home order, just to set the context for that. Before I get there, I will say that, you know, one thing that's been first and foremost in many of our minds as we've had these conversations is nutrition and food security. And so I'm so encouraged to hear the focus that you have on that, the focus on adaptability of your businesses and where you're looking for opportunities and ways to help is really important. And then, of course, the focus that I heard on your employee safety is critical. So Safer at Home. You know, we've seen over the course of the last few weeks the change from let's not gather with more than 50 people to let's not gather with more than 10 people, to what we saw yesterday with this Safer at Home. It's really the other side of the coin. It's really saying, let's just stay home. Let's do the best we can to limit contact with everybody. Let's do the best that we can to stay with our family units. It is not requiring a special piece of paper to leave your home. No one needs a special designation as an individual to walk out the door and go to the grocery store or go to see a doctor. That is all still permitted. But what we're really trying to do is say to Wisconsinites, let's exercise our best judgment and let's think about what we need to do and make those decisions, those hard choices to stay at home. We are fortunate to live in an age when many of us can work remotely. I'm sitting in my house right now in Southwest Wisconsin, and you know, it's really important that we take advantage of that and that everybody work remotely as much as possible, and I'm sure you're all doing that. The other piece of the order, you know, there's that focus on the individuals, and then of course there's the focus on the businesses. And as many of you recognize, food distribution and food processing were all granted special exemptions and deemed essential in our order, which, you know, of course, makes the most sense. As we look at the order, you know, there's a very thorough listing of what is considered essential, and that's really what we tried to do. We modeled the order after what we've seen in other states, particularly in New York and Ohio. Again, learning as we go here what the best way is to approach this conversation. And so we have a very thorough list of what is essential. Most of you will all find yourselves on that list, and we're encouraging businesses as they look at this all across the state to read the order very carefully and find themselves on that if they are essential. If there's a gray area of being essential versus not being essential, WEDC is standing up a process to answer those questions. You know, I'll admit to all of you, we have received a lot of questions. Let me put it that way. I don't want to say that we've been inundated, but it's pretty close. And we are working our way through a process of responding to folks. You know, many of those are small businesses that you all work with every day. A lot of the businesses that are affected by COVID-19 have already been impacted. These small businesses that are the coffee shops or the cafes all around our communities are what I'm referring to as kind of the front bumper in this accident. They're getting hit first, and a lot of our focus has been on helping them and reaching out to them. There is also, and I want to share this with Shelley, the work I've been doing with the businesses over the last few days includes developing a list of the very best practices that manufacturers can be looking at as they're assessing their workplaces. I think, you know, one of you mentioned that you do have workers who are close to each other, and these best practices include ways to consider making sure that social distancing is happening in the workplace, you know, looking at your work floor, your manufacturing floor, and assessing where are their choke points, where are there places where we might be able to adjust our operations a little bit, whether it's staggering shifts or, you know, literally looking at the use of the bathrooms and things like that to make sure that we can keep people separate, where possible, all meetings going to virtual, or I've heard of folks doing meetings on the floor where everybody can stand away from each other rather than in a meeting room. Just really simple stuff, super tactical, but ways to keep people safe. And so I'll, after the call, I'll share that with Shelley, and maybe she can find a way to share that with the membership that she's working with. I'm gonna look through, I have pages of notes, especially I added to them after hearing you guys this morning. There's a few things that I want to address that you all raised in particular as you were going through your challenges. Evan, we met a few weeks ago at the, I think it was the M7 annual meeting, and I just want to congratulate you on your adaptability to switch to disinfectant spray. I think that's really important. And then, you know, the fact that Patty is able to receive help from that with at Feeding America. Patty, you mentioned this concept of short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and that's really how I've been approaching this as I think about it from a WEDC perspective. We've got this short-term impact to our small businesses, and we've stood up a program at WEDC that we're calling the SB 2020 to really try to quickly help small businesses with grants and helping with that short-term cash flow crunch. We're looking at more resources, and, you know, with the passing of the federal legislation in the last 12 hours, I anticipate that we'll be seeing more resources that we can deploy, but there's a real bridge here that we're trying to work through of this cash flow crunch. Midterm, you know, we're gonna start to learn now as the distribution, you know, you all mentioned being inundated right now. What's the next phase of that as we start to see, if we start to see shortages or difficulty with logistics, how can we help with that? And then, of course, the long-term recovery, and I have my eyes on that also. I think I'm gonna have 3 eyes, maybe short-term, midterm, and long-term. But that long-term recovery, you know, and trying to assess when that is that 4 weeks from now? Is it 6 weeks from now? The order that the governor put in place yesterday has a 30-day timeline on it. Of course, we hope that's shorter, but if it is not, then how do we look at that beyond 30 days, 6 weeks or so? What do we need to get these small businesses up and running again? What's the capital outlay that they're going to need help with? And I think for a lot of you, you're going to be involved in this conversation. If you think about those coffee shops and you think about the small businesses that have perishables and food items, how do we fill up their shelves again so that they can open the doors? What do they need to be able to do that? Their cash is going to be dried up. They'll be looking at loans to help with working capital, but will they have that in hand when we need it? And how, as a food industry, are we going to be able to help with that? I'm still saying we. I can't get over it. I'm not sure I'll ever get over it. I'll always be a part of Organic Valley and the food industry. The other pieces of the puzzle that, you know, we're looking at, of course, I came into this role, and Arthur mentioned it, working with farmers. I have farmers at my heart, and to think about what's the impact there, even, you know, to the point of making sure that we're thinking about if farmers are directly impacted, either themselves or with their family members with COVID-19, how do we step in? What can we be doing for planning for that? You know, that's gonna all need to be kind of brought into focus here. And Brian, you know, you mentioned your concerns about liquidity and making sure that we're working with the banks to give you the opportunity to expand as you need to in this time. You're going to take on risk, but you shouldn't have to take all that risk on. We should find ways to share that. I want you to know that my family is particularly focused on helping you. I think we go through about 3 packages of RP's pasta a night. So we're big fans. And then the last piece I'll touch on, and then I want to turn it back to Shelley. I want to give the opportunity to folks to ask questions. Keith, you mentioned the lost staff opportunity you have. First of all, I want to congratulate you on having had a program where you're working with the Department of Corrections. You know, coming into this, before this, we were really focused on folks who are incarcerated in Wisconsin and making sure that they have the opportunity to transition out of prison and into the workforce. And so congratulations to you on that. I made a big note that I'm going to talk with Secretary Frostman at DWD to be thinking about, you know, he's getting overwhelmed with calls of folks applying for unemployment. We do have folks that are being laid off all around the state. How can we transition them into being able to help companies like you that need that help? And I think, you know, thoughtfully, Caleb, Secretary Frostman and I can be thinking about teaming up, as I'm hearing about businesses who have needs and he's hearing about employees who are looking for work or have the availability. How can we tie those together? And that's a key piece of what the governor has directed us to do, is to think about how to work together, connect the dots, so to speak, so that we can find those resources and tie them together. So I think I've gone through a bunch of notes, and I'm hoping that there are questions. I'm hoping that you all have thoughts. We're continuing to update our website at wedc.org with resources, both from the Small Business Administration side, where there are loans available. You know, the federal package that's coming forward is going to be really important for us to all keep an eye on and be working on together. So you'll see updates about that. But I think, Shelley, I've probably said enough, and would love to turn it over for questions.
Great, thank you. That was just a really nice play off of what you heard directly from our executive board members. And I'm guessing that given the audience or the participants on this call, what was heard by the board and responded in kind by you will really resonate with all of them. A couple of things that I wanted to follow up on. The list of best practices. I know that WMC had sent out something yesterday that I thought was just a really wonderful resource of best practices. I don't know if that's what you were referring to or not, but we certainly could build upon that, because I think that's a really helpful list, and we will do what we can to get that out to our members right away.
Yeah, that's exactly the list. And, you know, as I want to just give you a little backstory on that, which is, as we saw this conversation about essential and non-essential and shelter in place evolving around the country, the businesses from MMAC, which I see as one of your members, and M7, started to develop this list. And, you know, these are businesses that have global operations. And so they've seen this develop around the globe, and they're implementing these. You know, we're building it as we're flying the plane, but they came to me and said, you know, this is a list of practices, and I know from the business side of things that we know how to do this, right? We know how to look and develop a safety plan or a HACCP plan. This is very similar to that. Look at your business, understand your business, and, you know, adapt it. And that's why I think that list of guidelines is really helpful. You know, it is voluntary at this point, but I know that the Wisconsin businesses are willing to step into that space and take these on and implement them on their floors, and that's why I'm hoping to share that far and wide.
Fantastic. So we will give you get you links to the MMAC Milwaukee 7 resources that they have been compiling on a daily basis. They are also offering regular briefings to folks that you can chime in on and listen to as well. So we will definitely get that out. I think that idea of best practices is kind of ingrained to how we operate within the food and beverage industry. If we can learn from others, we want to be able to do that. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because workforce was mentioned, was that The MMAC, the Milwaukee 7, is also working with us and others on finding a way to better connect those that are being let go with those who need people. And I know today, for sure, Marcus Corporation is launching their Marcus Cares program. And it's an opportunity for you, and we'll get the link out to everyone where you can connect with them. And I think they've laid off, I forget how many people, a couple thousand, that these are people that are all great. They've already been vetted. They want to work. Obviously, they have some inkling of the food industry, having worked within the hospitality industry. So if there are ways that we can do more to connect you and your people in particular, like a Milwaukee Pretzel, if you're letting folks go, how do we keep those folks within the industry and keep them employed and working? So more to come on that front.
And I would just add, Shelley, the Marcus Group is, I've been in touch with them in the last few days. They have 11,000 employees in 20 states. And, you know, for those of you who are running fast and not thinking about it, Marcus Group is, you know, movie theaters and other restaurants associated with movie theaters, you know, again, incredibly impacted by COVID-19 and the restrictions that have been put in place. The Marcus Group has done everything they can to help their employees. It's an amazing effort by that company to step in and help their employees. They've tapped themselves out. And I know are heartbroken to be laying folks off. And so where we can support those employees and in turn support the Marcus Group, I think it's great. And I'm glad that connection's being made.
Fantastic. In addition to the theaters, the volume of hotels that they run as well. So there is a nice correlation between folks are letting go, having at least basic food handling practices under their belt that could translate into a food manufacturing facility. And FaB itself is going to be starting to offer our FaB Safe training via webinar so that we can get folks certified to come into a food manufacturing facility. And we'll start to have discussions around how we can offer that at no charge through this period of time so that, again, we can make an easy transition of folks coming from another industry, but into the food and beverage industry and making sure that they meet those food safety training requirements. All right, with that, we're gonna take some questions from the audience. If you could try and limit yourself to one question, that would be helpful because we're trying to roll through all of them. If we could unmute Gina Bulkey, our Director of Talent, and if you could share a question or two with the Secretary.
Hi everyone. So yes, we are receiving questions. First question is, do you have a feel for how the current federal stimulus funds will be administered at a state level?
I will say that we're trying to assess that. I've been a little fast and furious with making sure WEDC is able to respond on the essential versus non-essential. And given the nature of the debates in Washington, we were kind of waiting to see what landed and how it landed. Some advice that I've gotten in the last few days is that the way these funds are often released is somewhat in a flood and there's a rush to get them. And so one of the things that we're focused on is making sure that we can provide the advice and the technical assistance, especially to the smaller businesses around Wisconsin, to be able to access those funds. You know, typically big businesses have lawyers and folks who can easily understand and access those funds, and we want to make sure that we're able to do it as best we can to get the funds out to those in Wisconsin who need it. Work in progress, I guess, is what I would say for that one.
Okay. And then kind of follow up to that, are there any steps that businesses can start to prepare for filing for assistance when it arrives?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I would suggest having, you know, your most recent financial statements in place, your information about what you have as far as current loans if you have open loans with SBA, that answers some questions, and you're able to immediately unlock your credit information with them. So as much as you can have your ducks in a row before you start the process. And then I would suggest, looking for resources online. But there's also, an incredible network of economic developers and assistants already in place, especially with banks and credit unions, and working with those folks, because everybody is trying to be helpful. And rather than going it alone, I would offer, reaching out to those resources and getting help there, because they're probably already helping 5 other people and know some answers to be able to help you with.
Should we be giving any vendors or suppliers that support us as an essential business so that they can better guarantee they will continue to work as an essential business?
I think what you're asking is, should we be giving, a special letter or a special designation? Is that kind of what you're hinting at?
Yes, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah. So again, you don't have to have a special designation to be considered an essential business. And if you are wondering, reading the order in particular, the order identifies supply chain. So leading, as you come up the supply chain, up the value chain, you can find yourself in that if you are supplying to someone who's higher up on that value chain. So I'll give you an example. If you're making nails and you're supplying a hardware store is an essential business. And so, as you're providing supply to that hardware store, you are also an essential business.
Okay. And in addition to that, should companies be labeling their shipments as essential under the Safer at Home policy?
There's no requirement for that right now. And I haven't heard of anything in the works for that. So I wouldn't put your energy there right now.
How equipped is the state's healthcare system from staffing and supplies to deal with the increased cases?
That's a great question. So when you think about the concept of Safer at Home and why we've gone there, it's because if you look at the modeling, it demonstrates that if we don't do anything, if we continued as we were, we would see a very significant increase in cases over the course of the next 2 weeks. The numbers that I've seen, right now we have 5 deaths in Wisconsin from COVID-19, and we have about 490 confirmed positives. The modeling that the Department of Health Services is looking at, if we didn't do anything, then by the end of the first week in Wisconsin, we would have approximately, this is modeling, right? 22,000 positive cases and between 900 and 1,500 deaths. So that information then leads to okay, we need to do more and we need to do Safer at Home. And the whole challenge, the whole concept of flattening the curve is that you don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. So the healthcare system, the Department of Health Services has been working in the last few weeks to set up the capabilities that we'll need in the event we don't flatten the curve. And so the effort is to make sure that we have the facilities in place to be able to help it and mitigate that surge that we're also trying to put off.
And what areas of the state do you feel are going to be most vulnerable to that? And what can we as companies do to help with that?
Well, I think, where we're going to see the challenges are going to be in the more densely populated areas. That makes intuitive sense. I think we're going to see challenges also in the rural areas if, the small hospitals being impacted with a surge of cases. I know in my little town of Viroqua, talking with the docs here, they're doing everything they can to prepare for it, but there's concerns about that. As food companies, I think keeping in mind the underserved communities, keeping in mind, you know, right now schools are continuing to provide lunches, and those food security issues and where you might be able to step in and help those issues, I think then helps folks access food easily, and keeping, you know, obviously keeping as much of the supply chain and the logistics going into the grocery stores that we can is going to be critical, so that people feel like they can not have to go out and do big shopping expeditions, so that, you know, that piece of the puzzle stays in place in a calm way, I think is where, you know, the food and beverage industry can really step in and help.
Are you hearing that employees that have been laid off per se are preferring to stay home and collect unemployment and risk, you know, getting sick versus trying to go out and find other jobs at this moment?
I'm not hearing that. You know, it wouldn't, frankly, it wouldn't be surprising. I do know that, you know, employees, everyone is concerned about being safe in the workplace, whether it's, you know, if you're in an essential place, that's why it's important for the employers to be taking into consideration that social distancing and all of that. I've had the benefit recently of being in communication with the Manpower Group, which is just an amazing company that I'm sure many of you have worked with, and they're based in Wisconsin. Employers are the source of the most trusted information for employees. So as employers can be sharing information with their employees about social distancing, about taking the right precautions, I think that that's trusted information and will really help to share that information and share employees feeling that coming into the workplace, their employer has done what's necessary to make sure they're safe.
What is the state doing to prevent supply issues?
I think, you know, it depends upon what you're talking about. Supply of the state is working very hard to make sure that we have the supply of healthcare. My brain just went, healthcare products that we need. You know, working with the federal government, we are seeing folks like Evan adapt to help with manufacturing of needed materials. I've spent a fair amount of time on the phone in the last couple of weeks trying to connect different pieces of the puzzle. I have a great example. I have a company that was pivoting from making iodine for hospitals to use, you know, you put iodine on pre-surgery, to working on hand sanitizers, and they needed flip tops for the bottles. I connected them with a food processor I met a few months ago who I know is using flip tops, not to get the flip tops from that food processor, but to say, hey, this is where we get them, this is where we source them. And so I think those connections are important, and that's where the state is stepping in. You know, we have at WEDC a connection to so many businesses around the state, and so we're trying to be that that place where we can find those resources. I've had conversations with paper companies about what they can produce. Sewers and manufacturers are pivoting to making masks. It's pretty amazing to watch. And, you know, to Arthur's point about silver linings, that's a silver lining, I think, to watch that adaptability come to life.
This is going back to kind of talent acquisition. We heard it through the companies that spoke earlier. Are you hearing though that even though the businesses that are ramping up more, they're finding talent acquisition or retention to be an issue, even with so many entering the unemployment sector?
You know, mostly what I have heard is it's kind of that point counterpoint where there's the folks being laid off, and so is going to hire, you know, whether it's a grocery chain or a distributor, are hiring, you know, 10,000 people to try to help. I haven't quite seen yet the challenges of that. I think probably a benefit of the fact that we have had a workforce shortage for a good period of time here. You know, we all knew that coming. That was the topic of conversation 3 weeks ago constantly, was our workforce challenges. Is most of the companies have already vigorous efforts in place to be able to find workforce. And so I'm sure that they're ramping those up even more. But, you know, fortunately, that's not something we're having to invent at this moment. People know how to look for workers. And so hopefully we can just make those connections. And I believe that we need to be super tactical about it. And that's why I say, you know, if we can think about the companies that are needing to do the hiring, if we have the name of those companies and the companies that are putting people off. So like the Marcus Group connecting with, was that Keith? You know, if we can make those direct connections, those really tactical connections, I think that helps make those things happen fast, which is what we need right now.
Great, thank you very much. I think the questions have slowed that have been coming in. So one for you that I have is, you know, the amount of energy this morning on the news about people from New York fleeing New York to come to areas where they feel they're going to be safer. To me, it kind of begs the question, would it ever happen, again, looking at our supply chains, that there might be restrictions put on where trucks with deliveries can come and go from? So if your deliveries are all coming from New York State, do you see any kind of restrictions coming down the path towards that end?
Well, I think, first of all, I haven't heard anything about restrictions like that. But I will say that, you know, as we see different safer at home, stay at home, shelter in place regulations, you know, on a state by state basis, we're going to see some unfolding of interstate commerce challenges. So I had a company call me the other day. They needed to get critical supply chain items from New York to Wisconsin, but because that company in New York had not been deemed essential, they were having a hard time getting the products into Wisconsin for what we needed. So I think the next layer of this conversation is going to be interstate commerce and how we work between states. I've even heard, you know, the challenges of working between countries at this point. So I think that's the next layer of conversation, and probably where I would imagine some of my attention gets turned to in the coming days as we try to work through those issues. But the concept of restrictions on trucks moving around or through states is not something that I've seen at this point. But, you know, we're going to see challenges with that.
Yeah, definitely. Something else that we have been getting calls from prior to this actual briefing was, again, access to any kind of face masks for employees. Obviously, the priority of that production is going into the healthcare industry. But is there anyone here in the state that's looking to produce that could help fill the void for the food manufacturers?
So I'll just say that, you know, what I've learned about face masks in the last week and a half is the materials are typically manufactured in China. There's a particular non-woven fabric that's used for the NP95, I'm making up that number, face masks. That material is, you know, we're now seeing that supply chain from China as China is able to move through this. I think we're going to see some of that supply chain open up and we'll be able to access those more. We're also seeing some supplies of that from within the United States start to become available and accessible as this conversation, develops and becomes more urgent. And so I think we're seeing some of that. I do think it's going to continue to be prioritized for those frontline workers, whether it's healthcare or first responders. So I think that's the reality that we're facing right now. But hopefully, we'll see some of that manufacturing capability from China start to develop and be able to access some of that.
Sure. Well, we've got a couple more questions. Gina, if you want to chime in with those for us.
Sure. Secretary Hughes, from your experience at Organic Valley, how is that company handling the crisis? And how are the dairy farmers reacting? Will this add to our current dairy crisis?
It's my understanding, just in brief conversations with OV, that like others, they are being inundated right now with orders and requests, which is great. It's very encouraging. And, certainly I think we're all happy to see the relief for the farmers. Processing is going to be a challenge, and moving the products through the supply chain, and then kind of what's this midterm moment that we're going to hit, I think is on everybody's mind. But for what I understand, my husband still works at Organic Valley, and other conversations I've had, it's fast and furious at this point as folks are stocking up and things like that.
What federal and state resources are being mobilized to provide cures and vaccinations for COVID-19?
I think a lot of the focus, I'm really not qualified to answer that question, but I'll share with you what I know, which I think is very interesting. And this goes to testing, not to cures. In Wisconsin, we have a couple companies like Exact Sciences and Promega who are experts at developing testing and developing the reagents that are needed for the testing kits. And those companies have essentially dropped everything and are helping the Department of Health Services develop what we need. So I think that's, very encouraging. And I think it holds strong the Wisconsin mentality of stepping in and helping and doing what we can. As far as cures and vaccines, that's for people above my pay grade.
Are you aware of any essential businesses that have had to shut down their facility due to an employee, a production employee or supply chain employee possibly testing positive for COVID-19?
I am not aware of anyone who has had to shut down, and the DHS has provided guidelines for employers who, in the event you have a positive test of an employee, what you should do as far as a temporary shutdown to clean and that kind of a thing. But if you have a positive employee, you're not required to shut down your whole business, but they are providing guidance on what actions you should take and what steps you should take.
Can you elaborate on the federal assistance? And there's a couple of items here. So I'll start off first with FAST funds.
I am not familiar with FAST funds. If that's something that's come out in the last 12 hours, I don't have information about that.
Let's see here. Then we have where a refund is owed, the IRS will send the refund as quickly as possible. Can you elaborate on that?
The thing that I know right now about the IRS and the state of Wisconsin have both extended deadlines to July 15th for tax filing. And I don't know the status of refunds, but I'm sure that information is on the Department of Revenue's website right now.
Do you have any thoughts on maintaining culture for existing employees through this time, especially employees working remotely, and how to continue moving forward so you don't lose a sense of community and connectiveness within the workforce?
Well, I think I would say that the most important thing to keep in mind right now is the impact that all of this has on mental health. And again, something that has been first and foremost in the governor's mind. I had the benefit of having a couple minutes alone with him last week and raised this precise issue, well, mental health with him. And, you know, we're very concerned about it. This is not only is the anxiety and stress caused by, you know, this concern about, am I going to get sick? Are my family members going to get sick? Which is, you know, incredible and really hard right now. You have pre-existing mental health issues that are, you know, very difficult in these times. And we have, you know, terrible things like domestic violence and drug abuse that continue and started before all of this. And so, you know, as employers, I think acknowledging that goes a long way, acknowledging that this is very stressful on folks. Many employers have EAP assistance available and making sure that the employees have access to that. You know, for those folks who are working remote, it can be isolating and it's stressful. You've got kids at home because your schools are closed. Everybody's on top of each other, you know, so making sure, I think, that you're acknowledging that, making sure that you are setting expectations. I worked really hard with my team as we all went remote to encourage managers to set expectations with their staff about when you're going to be available. You know, we all know the damn phones are with us 24 hours a day and email is going off all the time. And so being really clear about expectations and saying, you know, you don't have to answer your email at 1 a.m. Or, you know, hey, I got to watch my kids. I loved that Matt is taking responsibility for this phone call, and it sounds like he and his wife are working hard on sharing childcare duties. You know, those are the kind of things that we need to be helping our employees do at this point. And I think that goes a long way towards preserving culture and community.
So we've heard that there is a lack of tests within the state. Is there any discussions or talk about essential businesses like food manufacturers having priority access to testing to better ensure the workforce is able to continue manufacturing?
You know, the main conversations I've heard right now are making sure that we have enough tests for folks who are showing symptoms and folks who have been exposed. It has not been delineated along the lines of essential versus non-essential businesses and having access along those lines. You know, first and foremost, we want to make sure that the healthcare workers and the first responders are taken care of, and then kind of going out in concentric circles from there. So, you know, that's where the lines of delineation I've heard is, you know, we want to make sure we're testing people who have symptoms. Like I said, we have companies here within Wisconsin that are working hard on the testing. And as we see them step into that, I think we'll see an increase in the testing, and we're positive about that.
Well, fantastic. I think we've run out the questions from the participants, and I don't want to extend this if we don't need to. So just to wrap up quickly, Missy, I think something that really stood out for me that you had said was that employers are the most trusted source of information. And I think that's a message that all of us can hear today in the scheme of how much information is flowing in right now, to know that you as employers are at the top of the list of who people trust. I think it's important for us to make sure that all of you are receiving the information that you need. So whether it's the WEDC resources, which are phenomenal that they've put together for COVID, mentioned the MMAC and the resources they've put together, WMC is doing a great job as well. There are webinars coming out. Knowing a lot of the questions that were asked of the secretary were general questions, not necessarily related to the food industry itself. I want to make sure that we're communicating with all of you these other valuable resources that are out there for you to tap. One last thing for you, Missy. Brad Rostowski on our team, our Director of Industry Growth, had shared something with me the other day and with our FaB Cap Accelerator companies. I'm not exactly sure the source of the information, but it has to do with the notion of share of stomach, and that I believe it was 54% of what we would consume as consumers prior to COVID really came from the food service industry, going out to dinner, those kinds of things, with 46% of what we consume coming more from a retail product, whether that product was purchased online at a farmer's market or at a grocery retail. So this shift of the industry, which sounds like it should be easy, but we know it's not because of how food gets moved around. I don't know if you had any insights into that at all, but this idea that 54% of food that was produced now needs to be done so in a way so that it can come through our retail channels.
So Shelley, I'm eagerly writing that down. 54% was through food service.
Correct.
This is Brad Rostowski. Okay, so this goes back to, I was in marketing at Sargento, and so that was back in the late 90s to early 2000s, and it's when grocery stores crossed over, or food service industry crossed over to taking a larger share of stomach. Now those dollars are measured in dollar sales, so I think in calorie sales it's probably not quite as dramatic, but the reality is that food service has really taken over a very large share of the eating occasions. And that was the whole issue that they were going after back in, I'm going to say, the early 2000s. That's where you saw the whole home meal solution push for manufacturers, and the retail grocery stores wanted quicker, easier meal solutions. So I shared that with a lot of my companies because I wanted them to start thinking about their supply chains, because the reality is those numbers still, I don't know if the exact, to the 54 to whatever is exactly right, but the essence is there, because I do know that back in the 2000s, the quick service and casual, the QSR and CSR restaurant channels were not as well as developed as they are now, 20 years later almost. So the reality is we have to figure out how to readjust that supply chain to go through grocery predominantly. And the problem with that, the big problem with that is not all food service products are easily translatable to retail packaging. So that was sort of the whole idea of how can we start thinking about that shift and understanding the effects it's going to have on the supply chain for the next, say, couple of months.
Well, it's a really great perspective to think about how much that is going to dramatically shift in the next few weeks, and how we don't know how much it's going to stick, right?
Correct.
Yep, that would be my dog. And so I would encourage. Okay, stop. Sorry about that. So that's it. You're supposed to be off this call by now. I think, as you all are facing the challenges from that 500,000 foot level, and you can help provide me and then the administration that information, and be thinking about how we can be helping with that. That's going to entail the Department of Transportation. It might entail the Department of Public Services for licensing and permitting. Like, as much as you can help us understand what that sea change means and how we can facilitate it, even if it is a short-term facilitation, would be really helpful. Because I can tell you, that's, I would imagine DATCAP has their eyes on that a bit, but helping us think about that and understand that will be really important.
Thank you. One other thing that I wanted to point out, remind everyone, is your story about the flip tops with the hand sanitizers. And one of the things that FaB hopes to do through these online LinkedIn forums is to have that easy exchange between companies so that the needs and the resources can be connected in a fashion that's done in a private manner, but also in a manner that other people can benefit from it. So that was just a great story of how resources and those connections and the tightness that we have here across the state within the industry, how we can start to help each other. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to say in closing, Missy.
I just really want to thank everybody for the hard work that you're all doing to keep up in this changing time. And as much as we can help you, my goal is to open the lines of communication. And you know, I hope I can come back not in you know, in short order and hear you know, and Shelley, let's talk about, can we come back in a quick time frame and be talking again, because I think as much as we can be sharing information and learning from each other right now is really critical. I'm going to carry this statistic that you just gave me at the end of the call forward. I want to carry forward some of Patty's concerns about the food banks and making sure that we're thinking about that and helping out there. As I mentioned, I'll talk to Secretary Frostman about the workforce issues. So this is really helpful. You all are essential. You're critically essential to Wisconsin. And so, you know, having this line of communication is really important. I've really enjoyed hearing from all of you today.
Thank you so much. If we could do a round of applause, we would for you.
Thank you. I could have my dog bark again, but he seems to have laid down.
There you go. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know your schedule is incredibly busy that you could squeeze in this time for us, and we will keep your team informed. And if we can do some of these on a regular basis, it would be wonderful. So thank you again very much. And for all the participants, again, we'll get your questions posted as well as the video. So if you want to share what we learned today with your colleagues, you'll be able to do that. I also want to thank those premium members that are listed on this slide there. Normally at our briefings, each of you get 1 minute at the podium to share the expertise that your companies offer the industry. And I know that all of you go above and beyond in your giving to FaB. So I want to make sure that we recognize those premium members as well. So I think with that, we'll let everyone out a few minutes early. And again, thank you so much, Secretary Hughes. Just keep up the great work. And you, our CEOs on the call here today, we need you. So continue to fight for us, and we'll continue to give you the resources that you need. And we wish you all wellness to your families and to your colleagues and to all the people who work with you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Bye.